Welcome to the Biotech Startups podcast by Exceeder. Join us as we speak with first-time founders, serial entrepreneurs, and experienced investors about the challenges and triumphs of running a biotech startup, from pre-seed to IPO, with your host, John Chi. In our last episode, we spoke with Shekhar Mitra about his transition from academia to Procter Gamble. We also heard more about his time at Columbia and Yale, collaborating with top-notch physicists, and his experience working with the FDA. If you missed it, be sure to go back and give part 2 a listen. In part 3, we talk with Shekhar about his experience as a Director of R&D in Asia, and the challenges and triumphs of taking innovation to a global scale. We also discuss the emotional and logistical challenges Shekhar faced relocating to China for a groundbreaking project, and the strategic mindset that drove him to establish the first innovation center in Asia. Lastly, we'll dive into the realm of luxury and premium brands, discussing how to redefine consumer experiences by leveraging cutting-edge technologies and creating emotional connections with brands.
You started to have your hands in a lot more. I know for a moment you were a Director of R&D in Asia. Can you talk about, your experience going global? So I'm making an assumption here that probably a lot of the research that you were doing was in Ohio for a decent amount of time. But then you moved to China.
Oh yeah, that was a very challenging situation, both personal as well as from a company assignment responsibility standpoint. I mean, my wife had to give up a job, and the president at that time, Mr. John Pepper, and the head of R&D at that time, head of global R&D, Gordon Brunner, had to convince us that, I'm doing something very, very important, and my wife, Anu, would be taken care of in case she wanted to do something worthwhile in China, which she ended up doing, thanks to P&G's support. And, it was a big move. My daughter was, I think, 7 years old. My son was 5 years old. My daughter drew a picture of me dragging them to a foreign land that had a precipice, a mountain and a precipice. She was quite graphic. I still have that photo, So she didn't want to move from her friends here in Indian Hill, where we lived in Ohio. And my wife had to give up her editorial job at a prestigious editorial position. And she would have to move, and they sacrificed, because the challenge that I took on at P&G was also phenomenal, which was to build the first big innovation center in Asia, and that was going to be in China. And the Chinese consumers at that time, 1997 to 2000, it was peak for consumerism in China, and P&G set a big shop and all that, but they needed innovation. They needed insights and understanding from that consumer. But I knew that if I could do that, build and hire and motivate talent to come in, and I could do innovation that was gleaned from insights gained from the Chinese consumer, there was a chance that I could even make it global. That was my mission from day one. I wanted to think big, even though my assignment was create innovation in China and make it a success. My brain was, if I can really get top-notch organization built in a period of a year, I would not only help the China business, I would help global business for P&G, for whatever brand I touched. And Crest happened to be the focus for me, oral care. And that indeed happened. My wish came true, but through hard work and very smart work and creative work of the people that I could hire into the team, and a lot of support from headquarters. Initially, it was a lot of not invented here syndrome, that happens in organizations, and it happened for the R&D organization in Cincinnati. But eventually they saw the benefit of some of the breakthrough ideas that led to brands like Crest Pro Health, which is still the biggest healthcare oral care brand that exists today. Okay, the whitening work that, teeth whitening work that went on. This is some of them all Chinese scientists that I hired.
Oh, wow. So that R&D was brought back to HQ.
Brought back to yes. And we went there. Yeah. We tiered Crest based on premium Crest and mid-tier Crest. One was costing $3 a tube, another was costing 50 cents a tube. But the benefits on the mid-tier Crest were never diluted. They always gave the fluoride enamel support. We showed through clinical studies. And the benefits on the more expensive Crest had lots of bells and whistles, And this was gleaned from very, very close understanding insights of the mid-tier, the middle class, user versus the very premium users. That led to branding that was completely different, that benefits that were different, but the basic benefit of enamel strengthening, fluoride release were kept the same. And that was applied throughout the globe because Russia needed lower cost Crest. Latin America needed lower cost Crest, and North America and Western Europe needed, more bells and whistles. But that wasn't my initial mission. My initial mission was to start the business in China with innovation coming, right? And build. So, but I always had the dream that what we do by finding insights with consumers in China and some parts of Asia is going to help the globe. And indeed, today, not only have we created Crest Pro Health, which is a huge, big sub-brand within the brand of Crest, and Oral-B is the other brand, is the same technology, and then creating mid-tier Crest that touches the lives of people who don't want to spend tremendous amount of money, but want to get the basic experience and the benefit of tooth strengthening. All these consumers serve. So suddenly, two completely different technology platforms are created through those insights in China. Not only helped China business, started the China business rolling and rocking, but Russia, Latin America, today, P&G, thanks to their top-notch, marketing folks, have expanded it globally, So that was a huge thing. While we built the Beijing, then I transferred the whole center to Beijing. It started in Guangzhou because that's where our headquarters for China was. Transferred it, and now I think P&G has more than 300 people in Beijing. I was part of the, one or two people that had the responsibility to build that center.
So there are three things that stood out to me as you were telling that experience. The first one is, I think it's important to note that there are sacrifices that are often made, but are not, that are not kind of like seen out front all the time. Your family made a big sacrifice.
Yes.
And
Definitely.
you can't do it alone. You can't do it alone.
Yes.
And two, you can't do it without sacrifice. I think a lot of the time is unglamorous, and it's just like, sometimes it just takes hard work and sacrifice to get something done. And I think, at least I found in my personal experience, there are no shortcuts.
No shortcuts.
No shortcuts, and you can't have your cake and eat it too. Something has got to give. And so I thank my wife all the time when I was talking about the shoestring budget that we used to have. I tell this story is that when Exceeder had $0 in revenue, I had $0 in salary. And so my wife took it upon herself to support me in those early days.
Amazing.
And And that is like, it's not something that, you know, is fully appreciated, I think, is that
Yes.
you like someone else is going out of their way to support your, whatever it may be, whatever your mission may be. And it's not, and I never believed in this, like, I did it by myself. I was fully just independent and I am a rock star now, fully on my own. There are so many people that supported you along the way, and it's important to give them their flowers. And then the second part that stood out to me in your story is there's a serendipitous element. You're like, I'm just going to open up the business in Asia, but lo and behold, it ended up becoming something much more. And I think this is the thing. It's kind of the risk on, right? It's like, take the risk because you don't know what's going to come. Like, we like to think that we are fortune tellers and we can predict the future, but in reality, you can't. And I'm going to imagine you probably, at that moment when you were moving to China, you had no idea that Crest Pro Health was going to be.
Yeah. No, not at all.
Like, no one has that expectation. And the third part that goes back to what we were talking about diversity is that I didn't know, I just learned that technology was started from the expansion into Asia and then brought, I thought it was made in Ohio.
Exactly.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Truly, we really challenged our thinking to make it a truly global platform, and no one, no one can claim that only one country or one lab was involved. It's multiple labs around the globe. In fact, a new lab. China was a new lab.
Yeah.
New people. Some of them didn't even know good English.
And that's the thing, right? I think there's something beautiful about that, like that you can bet on someone who's like, you guys are solid, you all are solid, and I'm going to bet on you, on all of you.
Exactly.
And magic happens versus you can just, it's easier to just go off a resume and a history and like track record. But there's sometimes amazing things can happen when you give a chance to someone who have yet to find that breakthrough innovation.
Absolutely. And include them, make them part of the team, excite them, motivate them. These young people were hungry to contribute, but you had to draw them in. You have to get them away from all the hierarchy that exists within big organizations like P&G. Shield them, give them the cover, but don't not hold them responsible.
Yeah, you still have to be accountable.
Accountable. Even if you have a failure, just like I got many lives at P&G with failures. Okay? Just like you got to give them the impetus to not lose steam, but to direct them into, keep them inclusive, but direct them into something else that they can bring their knowledge to. That is the whole work of leadership, in my mind. Right? We are the orchestra conductor. If I'm not transparent and I'm demotivating you, doesn't matter how good a violinist you are, you're not going to give 150%.
Absolutely.
That was my lesson.
And I love that analogy. And it was what our previous guest on the podcast, Martin Brenner, used a similar illustration in that, like, as a conductor, you have your back turned to the audience. You are not the one getting the applause. And as a leader, that you have to know that aspect of it, that applause is not, if that's what you need, that's not what a conductor is getting. It's the actual, the folks who are actually playing the music who are getting the applause, but you have to be okay with that. And also, and so that's a really, really, I think, apt kind of metaphor. And something that stood out to me about, as you were just talking about, like, Crest being kind of tiered out into different levels, kind of like the mass market level and kind of something that's getting into the
different consumer, tiers.
Yeah. And I know as you started to progress in your career and you're ultimately senior vice president and basically in the C-suite, you were starting to lead not only mass market brands, but also premium luxury brands.
Correct.
How did you think about that? And like because they're, they're very different products, very different consumers. How does like, for one who wants to, like, yes, we understand luxury and premium in the abstract, but when you're leading something like this and responsible for it on the P&L, that's a whole another thing. How did you conceptualize the dichotomy?
Yeah, very, very good question. First thing I'll tell you is that my philosophy was as a innovation leader, as I was getting more and more responsibilities and doing more and more new brand developments and leading brand innovations across the globe. My charter to all my brand teams, each of the brand teams was, hey, we need something absolutely breakthrough every 3 or 4 years. We can have small incremental things in brands because the need for the news, marketing needs of news, but something that is game-changing platform every 3 to 4 years. If we can do it, at least have what is called a lighthouse created of those, at least 2 or 3 of those in a 10-year period, you're golden, because you're going for the big home run while you're doing some small things to keep news going on and branding through innovation, right? So prestige, you talk about the prestige brands, which P&G was in charge of creating all the perfumery for. We had licensed it. One of the most successful. How did we do that? And I go back to what is breakthrough consumer product experience in my mind, okay? It is about the experience, number one, the overall experience, from the time you look at it, the package, to the time, for instance, for a perfume, when you spray it and you smell it in the store. It is an emotional bonding, if you can create that through either the perfumery or emotional bonding by creating amazing skin through rich Olay, or getting rid of, terrible pain menstrual cramp once a month, which is terrible for lots of women, with the leave. That kind of emotional bonding to the brand because it's innovation driven. And then noticeable effect. Noticeability of the efficacy of the effect is so important because that's what really creates what I call, in the consumer's mind, bonding that leads to repeat purchase. In the perfume industry, if you look at it, when I inherited that, when I looked at my philosophy of how do I create a breakthrough here with that kind of thinking, noticeability, because perfume is all about, impulse purchase. I like the smell right now. The lady at Nordstrom just sprayed it and rub it. It goes with my skin. I love it. Maybe my partner or fiance likes it, or my wife likes it, and I buy it. Impulse. But you have to realize one thing. All the expensive perfumes you buy, within 20 minutes, the top note of the perfume which you smelled is gone. Because a perfume is created with maybe 50 different natural molecules or synthesized molecules. The top note is the one, and it's like a pyramid. You have top notes of 10, 15 molecules that smell, then there are bottom notes, and then there's the absolute bottom note. So the perfume goes from the top note that evaporates on your skin to the next middle notes, next set of notes, right? So in 20 minutes, it's gone. So when I had the vision that what could be a big idea, and we talked to the consumer about their experience, one thing that was very clear is that the Gucci's of the world, the Dolce & Gabbanas of the world, okay? People are buying a $200 perfume. Within 15, 20 minutes, the top note is gone. Then you're smelling something different. Then you're smelling even worse, the butter, the base notes, the musk. You're smelling the musky, woody notes, which is not the perfume we bought for $200, right? The technology we could bring, again, within P&G, we made a lot of connections from different parts of P&G and from the outside world. And that's one thing. The world is the oyster for innovation ideas. You've got to just go in and tap into them, right? In this case, P&G had a technology called cyclohexane that is like a molecule that traps perfume and releases it slowly as you get wet and sweat. So what we did was, we started to use this technology to extend the top note release profile of the top notes that you smelled when you first put the perfume, from 20 minutes to more than 1.5, 2 hours. So you created a long-lasting sensation and experience, talking about experience, and noticeable difference between the perfumes we had as part of our franchise versus the others that did not have this idea or technology. So it was, even during COVID times, I heard before P&G got away from the business, P&G always cuts brands, sells brands, buys brands, and rejuvenates with innovation, does that, builds the value, sells it to somebody else, depending on the overall strategy of the company and its categories. Before we got rid of it, I spoke to the CEO and, the president. The fact is that nobody in the industry could do that, and even during the worst of times, 2009, when the whole market had tanked, people were losing jobs, the recession, people were still buying our perfumes, and it was growing at almost double digit. Because the perfumes, first of all, the category is such that, the upper echelon still buys luxury goods. But our perfumes are doing extremely well in the market, the Dolce & Gabbanas and the Gucci's of the world, because the noticeability of these perfumes and the emotional tie that the consumer had, she or he were not willing to give up that. But the technology went in to drive that differentiation in these brands. That is what a contribution of the innovation team was in this category.
That's so cool. That honestly, it's so cool because it reminds me of a couple of things. And the first component is the innovation that you're describing. And it reminds me of Hermes. And like Hermes bags have the saddle stitch.
Yes.
That's like, it feels analog and, it is, and maybe not so modern, but it's a technological, like,
yes, it is.
You can't see it. And it's incredibly, like, it is meant to last a lifetime. And, it's very rare when a saddle stitch breaks, but that's an innovation on a leather good.
In and of itself, yes.
That's an innovation. And it doesn't have to be like, the reason why I bring up this example is because, we're talking about like chemical structures and like extended release, but it could also be a technical, like a stitch on a bag.
Absolutely. It can be innovation. Packaging. It's a packaging innovation.
Yeah.
And, in the luxury goods world, though, packaging and the crystal, the glass, the little thing that sticks, the jewel that sticks there in Dolce & Gabbana or Gucci, very important. Because it's the total experience. Noticeability driven through technology, total experience driven through design, all that was important in this category. And, as a global leadership council member, I had to have responsibilities across the company, some responsibilities. And I had perfume capability and novel new materials, sustainability capability for the entire company at that time, in addition to my category business innovation role for perfumes and others, brands. And, one of the things that my corporate team, that was a corporate team across, right? So I had the perfume capability, and we produced some of the world's best perfume-based experiential products. If you look at Downy, and those little crystals that go into your wash that keep the perfume there for long lasting, for long length of time, and the perfume that enhances your experience from your laundry. All of those things at that time, the corporate team were thinking about how to extend it, not keep the experiences only for the world's most expensive products, like fine fragrances, which was my direct responsibility, but how to apply some of this perfuming knowledge. I had some very capable people like Steve Hicks and others who were really fantastic. They would be called vice presidents these days, but at that time they were directors, global directors by title. P&G has changed his title since it has categories. And, he was one of those with his top perfumers, within the organization, driving application across different brands, even brands that were not as expensive as fine fragrance. I had one of the top organization leaders, Mr. Sumit Basin, who operated out of England labs, and his people in Egham, UK, they were like, absolute breakthrough thinkers in this world, how to apply. But you know what? P&G allowed me to have that responsibility as part of my, expanded responsibilities, to have that corporate touch across many, many brands. And that's the beauty of P&G that we had, which is that, we took learning from one area, applied it. White strips, if you take a look at white strips, the packaging technology, it was a packaging technology with bubbles. We used that to put bubbles on, backlight on the white strips and fill it with peroxide to put it on teeth. It was a packaging technology.
Oh, no way.
Yes. And that has been used, by the way, on these bags that Glad comes up with, these bags that smell perfume. Those are actually bubbles that have perfume in them. So when you take the garbage bags and open them up, that's how we get the smell.
That's so crazy.
The P&G technology that was discovered in the packaging section of the company, I leveraged it with my top scientist, Paul Segal, at that time, and is still there in the company, to put, the team put peroxide in a slow release to make strips, white strips. That went into bags, garbage bags for perfuming, So it's a packaging discovery.
That's so cool, because I think something that, you can find inspiration from anywhere.
Yes.
And as long as you're open to it. I'm actually reading the Rick Rubin's book on creativity.
Yes.
And he talks about it just being open to the universe and taking a look. And if you take a look and you like what you see, keep it. If you don't like what you see, let it go.
Let it go. Absolutely.
But you just have to be open. And that's kind of like the hard part. And something else that really stood out to me as you were describing the premium and luxury brands is the emotional element of it.
Yes, very much so.
I think that is something, we're trying to think about is and the longer I do it, working at Exceeder, is a lot of purchases are emotional purchases. Almost all of them are emotional purchases. And the question is, how do you create that emotional connection with a given brand? I can't pretend to have the answers here. And I think P&G has some magic there. But I guess, what are your thoughts on creating that emotional bond for a brand or product?
And it's deep rooted, the emotional drivers can come from many different directions. One is really, there is some physiological effects that go on when you smell something, and you smell something for longer length of time. The brain has an effect, and that is now being well studied with magnetic resonance, fMRI, and all of that. Then there are the emotional aspects of a, let's say, a pet product, right? And I worked on a very, very small, I was part of a board called the Aura Brush Board that had this tongue cleaner brush that had little.
I use it.
You use it, right?
I use it.
It really works.
It's amazing.
Wonders, right?
It's amazing.
Right? So I was on that board, and I'll tell you, it has the little bristles that go into the deep grooves of the tongue and take away the bacteria in the food. That's how it works well. That's how it makes a big difference. What did we do? We said, I was on the board, and like all other venture boards, I like to sync my connectivity to it, and I'm not suggesting it was my idea, but at least I could bring some elements of need to that category to design this pet brush that is called Aura Pop. I don't think it has really made it big. It tells you that for brands to succeed, also you need awareness building. It takes a lot of money. But those who use the Aura brush is the same thing that you're using, but it's a brush that has a bigger base of bristles, and you put a little bit of a attractive smelling gel or whatever on that brush, and your dog comes running and licks it. Guess what? It's the same effect as brushing your teeth, brushing your tongue, because the dog is licking that brush. And this brush is the same design as the human brush that you were using, right? And so what we found were why consumers, once they knew about it, they wanted to buy this and to really hold on to it, is because of the bonding. They were seeing this little puppy come running. It's the cutest thing. If I could show you that video, that was on YouTube at one time. And you see this puppy come running, and you see the pet owner just absolutely dazzled by this. This is what I called very simple innovation that's beneficial to the dog's tongue because they smell rotten because of the bacteria on their tongue. But the real effect is that this product was bringing joy to the pet owner, right? Very simple innovation. Came through connection from the human brush, tongue brush, and now bringing joy to them. So there is a different ways in which emotion can be driven by, pharmacologically active things, like perfumes, it can be driven through actual interaction with your daughter or your son or your child or your pet, right? And I believe, and I admit I haven't worked in the the huge category that P&G, highly successful category called diapers, but I've used diapers on my children, right? My wife and I have used diapers on our children. And the fact that when the diaper at night really does super absorbency, doesn't cause irritation to the baby's skin, what a relief that is. I can sleep through the night. That's an emotional bonding to P&G's diapers, and right? Versus, I don't want to mention names of any brands or anything because I don't know that category well, but I'm sure that's what's very successful for P&G, right?
Absolutely.
P&G diapers have been successful. They not only invented the concept of diapers, but the concept of keeping the baby, really, really feeling good when something close to their skin, is making them feel good. And therefore, the bonding on the parents, and they can sleep through the night, knowing full well that the baby has a leak, he or she is not going to feel uncomfortable. Huge emotional relief. That's the kind of thing I think about it.
I love hearing these things because it's like almost like a behavioral thing.
Yes,
that it's behavioral. And I think there's a lot of, for anyone who's thinking about launching a new brand product, is to really think from like really just get down to it about these kind of like emotional bonding moments, behavior that your product might kind of influence and kind of induce behavior. Because that's how, it's great to have a fantastic product that's like very effective, but it's another thing to have it be a very effective and make you feel a sense of
elevated.
Yes. It's elevated. Because I think that's how you want to really, there's a ton of products out there. There's a ton of products, and how do you stand above the rest is like a critically important question any entrepreneur should ask them, in whatever vertical that you're in.
That's all for this episode of the Biotech Startups podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion with Shekhar Mitra. Tune in for part 4 of our conversation to learn more about his journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to having you join us again on the Biotech Startups podcast for part 4 of Shekhar's story. The Biotech Startups podcast is produced by Exceeder. Don't want to miss an episode? Search for the Biotech Startups podcast wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. Exceeder provides research labs with equipment leases on founder-friendly terms to support paths to exceptional outcomes. To learn more, visit our website www.exceeder.com. On behalf of the team here at Exceeder, thanks for listening. The Biotech Startups podcast provides general insights into the life science sector through the experiences of its guests. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast is at the user's own risk. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not the views of Exceeder or sponsors. No reference to any product, service, or company in the podcast is an endorsement by Exceeder or its guests.